Back for part two. This is personal incredulity. Because you found something difficult to understand or are unaware of how it works, you made out like it's probably not true. Complex subjects like biological evolution through natural selection. No, that's not. I don't think that's the case. But let's carry on. Require some amount of understanding of how they work before one is able to properly grasp them. This fallacy is usually used in place of that understanding. An example: Kirk drew a picture of a fish and a human, and with effusive disdain asked Richard if he really thought we were stupid enough to believe that a fish somehow turned into a human, through just like random things happening over time. Yeah, well, that's what they want you to believe, isn't it? But it's probably not true, because, I don't know, theory of evolution, it's just a theory, it doesn't make sense. So, special pleading. You moved the goalposts or made up an exception when your claim was shown to be false. Humans are funny creatures and have a foolish aversion to being wrong. Rather than appreciate the benefits of being able to change one's mind through better understanding, many will invert ways to cling on to old beliefs. Here we see this a lot. One of the most common ways that people do this is to post-rationalize a reason why what they thought to be true must remain to be true. It's usually very easy to find a reason to believe something that suits us, and it requires integrity and genuine honesty with oneself to examine one's own beliefs and motivations without falling into the trap of justifying our existing ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. An example: Edward Johns claimed to be a psychic, but when his abilities were tested under proper scientific conditions, they magically disappeared. Edward explained this, saying that one had to have faith in his abilities for them to work. Loaded question. You asked a question that had an assumption built into it, so that it couldn't be answered without appearing guilty. Loaded question fallacies are particularly effective at derailing rational debates because of their inflammatory nature. The recipient of a loaded question is compelled to defend themselves and may appear flustered or on the back foot. Not only is this fallacy a kind of appeal to emotion, it also insidiously frames the argument in a misleading way, like a preemptive strawman fallacy. An example: Grace and Helen were both romantically interested in Brad. One day, with Brad sitting within earshot, Grace asked in an inquisitive tone whether Helen was having any problems with a drug habit. The burden of proof. You said that the burden of proof lies not with the person making the claim, but with someone else to disprove. The burden of proof lies with someone who is making a claim, and is not upon anyone else to prove the negative. The inability or disinclination to disprove a claim does not render that claim valid, nor give it any credence whatsoever. The example of not being able to disprove a teapot in orbit serves to illustrate how any claim, no matter how absurd, could be validated if this faulty logic was accepted. An example: Bertrand declares that a teapot is at this very moment in orbit around the Sun, between the Earth and Mars, and that because no one can prove him wrong, his claim is therefore a valid one. Ambiguity. You use a double meaning or ambiguity of language to mislead or misrepresent the truth. Politicians are often guilty of using ambiguity to mislead, and will later point to how they were technically not outright lying if they come under scrutiny. The reason that it qualifies as a fallacy is that it is intrinsically misleading. Example: when the judge asked the defendant why he hadn't paid his parking fines, he said that he shouldn't have to pay them because the sign said "fine for parking here." And so he naturally presumed that it meant that it would be fine to park here, to park there. The gambler's fallacy. You said that runs occur to statistically independent phenomena such as roulette wheel spins. This commonly believed fallacy can be fairly said to have created an entire city in the desert of Nevada, USA. Though the overall odds of a big run happening may be low, each spin of the wheel is itself entirely independent from the last. So whilst there may be a very small chance that heads will come up 20 times in a row if you flip a coin, the chances of it happening on each individual flip remains 50-50 and isn't influenced by what happened before. An example: red had come up 6 times in a row on the roulette wheel, so Greg knew that it was close to certain that black would be next up. Suffering a kind of economic form of natural selection with this thinking, he soon lost all his savings. The bandwagon. You appeal to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. The flaw in this argument is that the popularity of an idea has absolutely no bearing on its validity. If it did, then the earth would have made itself flat for most of history to accommodate people's popular belief. What? I forgot about that one. Example: Seamus pointed a drunken finger at Sean. Seamus pointed a drunken finger at Sean and asked him to explain how so many people could believe in leprechauns if they're only a silly old superstition. Sean, however, had had a few too many Guinness himself and fell off his chair. Maybe it says that the earth would have made itself flat for most of history to accommodate people's popular belief. Looks like it's made itself a ball for the majority of its history to accommodate people's popular belief. Appeal to authority. You use the opinion or position of an authority figure or institution of authority in place of an actual argument. It is important to note with this fallacy that authorities in given fields may very well have valid arguments, and that one should not dismiss another's experience and expertise. However, to form an argument, one must defend it on its merits, i.e., know why the person in authority holds the particular position that they do. It is, of course, entirely possible that the opinion of a person or institution of authority may be entirely wrong. Therefore, the authority that such a person or institution holds does not have an intrinsic bearing with regard to whether something they say is true or not. Example: not able to defend his position that evolution isn't true, Bob says that he knows a scientist who also questions evolution, and presumably isn't a primate. There we go again with more. They're using. No, I don't know. Whoever's made this. Composition division. You assume that one part of something has to be applied to all or other parts of it. Often when something is true for the part, it does also apply to the whole. But the crucial difference is whether there exists good evidence to show that this is the case. Because we observe consistencies in things, our thinking can become biased so that we presume consistency to exist where it does not. An example: Daniel was a precious child and had a liking for logic. He reasoned that atoms are invisible and that he was made of atoms and therefore invisible too. Unfortunately, despite his thinky skills, he lost the game of hide and go seek. No true Scotsman. You made what could be called an appeal to purity as a way to dismiss relevant criticisms or flaws of your argument. In this form of faulty reasoning, one's belief is rendered unfalsifiable because no matter how compelling the evidence is, one simply shifts the goalposts so that it wouldn't apply to a supposedly true example. This kind of post-rationalization is a way of avoiding valid criticisms of one's argument. Example: Angus declares that Scotsmen do not put sugar on their porridge, to which Lachlan points out that he is a Scotsman and he puts sugar on his porridge. Furious like a true Scot, Angus yells that no true Scotsman sugars his porridge. Genetic. You judge something as either good or bad on the basis of where it comes from, or from whom it came. This fallacy avoids the argument by shifting focus onto something's or someone's origins. It's similar to an ad hominem fallacy, in that it leverages existing negative perceptions to make someone's argument look bad, without actually presenting a case for why the argument itself lacks merit. Example: accused on the 6 o'clock news of corruption and taking bribes, the senator said that we should all be very wary of the things we hear in the media, because we all know how very unreliable the media can be. Black or white. You presented two alternative states as the only possibilities, when in fact more possibilities exist. Also known as the false dilemma, this insidious tactic has the appearance of forming a logical argument, but under closer security it becomes evident that there are more possibilities than the either-or choice that is presented. Binary black or white thinking doesn't allow for the many different variables, conditions and contexts in which there would exist more than just the two possibilities put forth. It frames the argument misleadingly and obscures rational, honest debate. Example: whilst rallying support for his plan to fundamentally undermine citizens' rights, the Supreme Leader told the people they were either on his side or they were on the side of the enemy. Begging the question. You presented a circular argument in which the conclusion was included in the premise. We'll go into this about the premises and syllogisms and emphomemes and stuff at a later date. But the premise is like when you have a syllogism, you have a major premise, a minor premise, and the conclusion. If you leave any of them out, then it becomes an enthymeme and stuff like that. This logically incoherent argument often arises in situations where people have an assumption that is very ingrained and therefore taken in their minds as a given. The problem with this way of thinking is that it is internally inconsistent. Circular reasoning is bad mostly because it's not very good. Example: the word of Zorbo the Great is flawless and perfect. We know this because it says so in the great and infallible book of Zorbo's best and most truest things that are definitely true and should not ever be questioned. Well, it sounds like science. Not all science. Natural science, good. Applied science, good. Mathematical equations, good when they're in conjunction with natural science and applied science. But it's scientism. Pseudoscience. Appeal to nature. You argue that because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, or ideal. Just because something is natural does not mean that it's good. For instance, murder is very natural, but most of us agree that we don't think it's a very good thing to be doing. Nor does its naturalness constitute any kind of justification for it. Similarly, human beings have naturally lived for around 30 to 40 years of age for most of history. But thanks to modern medicine, hygiene and better understanding of the world around us, we now live for approximately twice as long in the developed countries. Example: the medicine man rolled into town on his bandwagon, offering various natural remedies, such as very special plain water. He said that it was only natural that people should be wary of artificial medicines, such as antibiotics. Well, yeah, I think you should be. Anecdotal. You used a personal experience as an isolated example instead of a sound argument or compelling evidence. It's often much easier for people to believe someone's testimony as opposed to understanding complex data and variation across the continuum. Quantitative scientific measures are almost always more accurate than personal perceptions and experiences. Well, no, not always. But our inclination is to believe that which is tangible to us, and or the word of someone we trust over a more abstract statistical reality. Well, example: Jason said that that was all cool and everything, but his grandfather smoked like 30 cigarettes a day and lived until 97. So don't believe everything you read about meta-analysis or methodologically sound studies showing proven casual relationships. The Texas sharpshooter. You cherry-pick the data clusters to suit your argument or found a pattern to fit a presumption. This false cause fallacy is coined after a marksman shooting randomly at barns and then painting bullseye targets around the spot where the most bullet holes appear, making it appear as if he's a really good shot. Clusters naturally appear by chance, but don't necessarily indicate that there is a causal relationship. The makers of Sugarette candy drinks points to research showing that of the 5 countries where Sugarette drinks sell the most units, 3 of them are in the top 10 healthiest countries on earth. Therefore, Sugarette drinks are healthy. Middle ground. You made out like a compromise or middle point between 2 extremes must be the truth. Much of the time, the truth does indeed lie between 2 extreme points. But this can bias our thinking. Sometimes a thing is simply untrue and a compromise of it also untrue. Halfway between the truth and a lie is still a lie. Example. Holly said that vaccinations caused autism in children, but her scientifically well-read friend Caleb said that this claim had been debunked and proven false. Their friend Alice offered a compromise, that maybe vaccinations cause some autism, just not all autism. I don't know. That's going into subjective stuff now. Like I said, I've not wrote this. It's just what is on here, what someone else has wrote. I just found this PDF and I'm just getting people know. Right, thank you.